and Shaq's at the MGM Grand Arena. We're having a conversation. And I said, so tell me about your upbringing, your relationship, values, and principles that your dad taught you. And he says, my dad would tell me, if you listen to me, I'll make you the most dominant big man of all time. So your dad told you that. He told me that. Okay, what else? And all these other stories you hear about with Shaq and his dad. You know, his dad would say, finish this. He was a drill sergeant, so everything was yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. He had that kind of a dad, very much of a disciplinarian, right? Who raised him. What are some stories with your pops? You know, you obviously a lot of it has been heard. Yeah. But what are some stories about your dad on how he raised you and Tristan?
Yeah, my father was, I believe, the best father on the planet. I think that every son should hopefully think the same of their father. I think a father's role is to be a superhero. I think a father's role is I think one of the big mistakes in modern society is that people think that a father should be a second mother, and I disagree. I think a father should be a superhero. And sometimes a superhero needs to go do superhero things. My father wasn't always home. He was away. But when he came home with a story. And I think that the quality of his presence was more important than the quantity of his presence. He raised us with absolute duty to our last name. He made it very, very clear for a very long time that being a Tate means something and that you have to live an honorable life and a life that's true to God because of that. And also his expectations to us were exceptionally high because we were Tates. When I did something fantastic, when I became state chess champion at the age of 5, or when I did exceptionally well my SATs, he moved me up 2 grades, etc. I didn't come home and say, Dad, I did this. And him go, wow, good job. He was like, well, you're a Tate. Duh. Well, who are you competing against? I was like, well, the other kids in school. Who are they? Don't know. Exactly. You're a Tate, of course. So he always had this huge expectation of us and made it clear that the last name means something and we have to stay true to it. And I think that this is kind of something that's missing from modern society. When you have a duty to your bloodline and a duty to your ancestors, that is something which you carry with yourself away from cameras and away from the eyes of the outside world. So it's been something that's been massively beneficial to me. Even when I went through hard times in my life, I understood that being a Tate prevented me from doing anything that's detrimental to myself. Even basic things. We talked about, let's say, heartbreak. If I had my heart broken when I was young, instead of chasing a girl and embarrassing myself, I could sit in my room alone and think, I'm a Tate. I can't do that. I can't. That's not how Tates act. Love you very much. Goodbye. And I missed her with all my heart, but that was the game. She let her go fuck someone else and just be heartbroken a while and get over it. Because I felt a duty to my last name. So what he did exceptionally well was instill duty to the bloodline and duty to the ancestors. We understood who my family were, understood where we came from, knew who my grandfather was, my great-grandfather was, etc. And he always had very, very high expectations of me. And it's often interesting. People say, you know, if you have too high expectations on kids, it's bad for them, da-da-da. I can only talk from my personal experience. The fact that such high expectations were held for me were a massive benefit to me. My father was a disciplinarian. He was also in the Air Force. If I fucked up, he hit me. He never beat me. He never abused me. But there was certainly a realm in which if I fucked up, I get slapped. It only happened twice maybe, ever. But I knew it was an option.
Your father's only hit you twice.
Twice in my life, yeah. And I say this, I said this on Twitter when I had a Twitter account. Someone was saying that hitting kids is bad. And I said, yeah, I understand. You can't abuse kids. It's a fine line. I know it's a very nuanced, detailed argument. But in the real world, there are lines that if you cross, violence appears. If I get in your face as a man and start running my mouth, sooner or later, it becomes physical. That's the real world. So as an upbringing of a child, I think there should be lines that if they're crossed, violence appears. I don't see anything wrong with that. I was never abused in any way, but if I really fucked up, and both times now in hindsight, I fucked up massive. And I learned. And I was taught, oh shit, that's a line. Mm-hmm. And I think especially with young men, if there's never going to be a physical line, what line is there? Especially with young, rebellious men. I don't know. But maybe that shaped my mindset for a long time because I always understood there are lines that if you cross, things become physical. And I've always kept that in mind for how I conduct myself. I say this all the time. Once again, I said this in YouTube videos. I don't argue with people. If I get in a disagreement on the street, I don't argue. I don't, hey, bro, you parked. That's not who I am. I'm like, okay, bro, leave it. I leave it to the last second until I feel like there's no other choice. And then it's pure violence. Because I don't see the point in arguing. That's feminine to me, a verbal argument. Like, I try my very best to de-escalate because you never know who you're fucking with and you never know if they want to go to jail. But there's a line and it gets to that line where that's the only possible repercussion. That's all that can happen. And I try very hard to stay away from that line, but I've always been very aware that line is there. And that served me very, very well in my life. The morgue and the prison, both of them are full of egos. And because I know I can handle myself, I'm the number one guy to talk down a fight. But once I realize that talking ain't going to work, I'm the complete opposite. And I think that was taught by my father.
Wow.
That's how I was taught, you know. And
have you seen him fight? Did you ever see him fight?
so my father, I have a saying, which is my most famous saying that I say. I said at the end of the final video. My unmatched perspicacity coupled with sheer indefatigability makes me a feared opponent in any realm of human endeavor. And for the people watching, it means unmatched perspicacity, your ability to perceive and understand the world, pay attention to things and take in all the different variables. Pay attention, because a lot of people don't. Coupled with indefatigability, the ability to never become tired, makes you a feared opponent in any realm of human endeavor. So if you pay attention to everything and you analyze the chessboard correctly and you never give up, it doesn't matter if you're trying to climb Mount Everest. It doesn't matter if you're trying to escape a social media ban. You're a dangerous guy. He doesn't quit and he pays a bunch of attention. That's a guy you don't want as an enemy. And my father said that. I heard my father say that. The story behind it is we were in Detroit. My father was a world level chess player. He was an amazing man, but he was to a degree a flawed man, let's say. He liked to gamble. My father's attitude towards life is something I've also adopted because I've even said it myself. I'd either want to be filthy rich or flat broke. I feel like slavery's in between. And I said to my brother when we had no money, let's just move to Thailand. Let's just move to Thailand and fight and just live on $50 a day and just run around on the beach and have our time back. Like, what are we slaving away a job to pay the rent and then we're broke? I'd rather I either have to feel like I'm going to make it or just quit capitalism.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in between. And my father was the same. So he won a chess tournament, a low level one. He made like $3,000 or something. And he said, listen, son, the rent's paid and I either want 100 grand or nothing. It's just who I am. So we went to the casino, lost all the money. Casino's a bad place to go and try and get rich, but that's my dad. Lost all the money. So then we were in Detroit and we were hustling in a park. My dad was a chess park hustler. He'd go into the parks and he'd sit down and say, you all get 10 minutes. I get a minute on the clock. And he'd play 10 games simultaneously while they had 10 minutes each. And he'd have a minute. And he'd sit there and just smoke them all for money, right? And take all the money in. So, and we'll talk about world level chess players because I'll make it clear. I do not have the intellect to be a world level chess player. Even though I have the genetics, it's something you're born with. It's kind of like being a human calculator. It's something in your brain. You can't train. It's like learning to sing. You can learn to sing, but you're not going to be Mariah Carey unless you're born with it, right? The way his mind worked was a different level of intellect, and I don't possess it. And that's a blessing and a curse because I'm better socially than he was. He was not very sociable as a person. And in these high-level chess tournaments, a lot of them are not very sociable people. And we can talk about that at length. But so he made some money, and we went to a gas station in Detroit, and I remember this vividly. I was about 8 or 9 years old. I went to the back, to the coolers. I opened to get a drink, and I heard all this noise. And when I turned around, my dad was fighting 3 men. And I don't know how the fight started. I don't know where it came from. He had one of them up against the door, and he had him up like this, and he was biting his face. And the other 2 are punching my dad in the back of the head. And I'm a kid. And I just stood there like, the fuck? And the Korean guy behind is shouting, stop, 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 stop. And I'm standing there. And I didn't know what to do. So I kind of went to walk over. And although my dad was getting punched, and although he was biting this guy, I remember him turning to me and saying, stay there. And went back to biting the guy. I don't know the fuck. To this day, I don't know how the fight started. Korean guy came around the back, kind of got in the middle. The guys went out. They threatened to kill him. We're going to fucking kill you like gangbangers. We're going to fucking kill you. My dad had blood all over his face, some from the guy, some from him. His eye was black. His eye socket got fractured. His eye was closed. His bumps all back the head. So we stood there and the Korean guy started panicking, saying, my store damaged, my store. Wait, police, wait, police, wait, police. And I think my dad was a bit disorientated. He never went down, but I could tell he was a bit dizzy. So my dad stood there and he stood like this, like in like military position, stood in the corner of the place and we waited for the police officer to come. And the police officer came and start doing reports, asked what happened, start talking to reports, etc. And the police officer said to my dad, so you fought these 3 guys. He goes, okay, well, what's your job? My dad said, I'm a chess player. And the police officer said, well, maybe you should have been something else. And my dad said, my unmatched perspicacity, coupled with sheer indefatigability, makes me a feared opponent in any realm of human endeavor. I remember him saying that was his answer to the police officer. And the police officer was like,
Yeah, how do you spell perspicacity?
Okay, bro.
Unfatigability.
It wrote it down.
Yeah.
And that was a saying that my dad started using then on after, and I adopted. So that's the only time I ever saw him fight. And he didn't win. I mean, the guy got fucked up, but he didn't go down. I mean, he dealt with all 3 of them, and they left in the end. So that's the only time I ever.
Did you see rage in him? Like, did you know he had the rage or no? His personality was a different personality.
No, my father certainly not really had rage. My father was a super unique individual. It's hard for me to even explain. You have to imagine a big black guy, big physically dominating, dangerous guy who's a chess genius, but also he was extremely condescending, but I understand why he was the way he was. when you're wired like he is, everyone is a moron. And when I say he had photographic memory, everyone goes, oh, I know someone with photographic memory. No, you don't. I'm talking about, what's your phone number? So, cool. 6 years later, just on a payphone. Like, it's just like, how the fuck? Just everything you told him, he remembered. Everything. And that becomes a detriment, because if you remember and you pay attention, if you remember every number plate of every car around you, then you're in a car with the guy and he's like, last Thursday, that car was beside us. Dad, was it? I don't know. Of course you don't know. You don't know, but I do know. That car was beside us next Thursday. Do you believe in coincidences? Like, well, maybe it is a coincidence. He goes, maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. And then you can't argue with him because you don't know if he's like, well, you're not smart enough to remember all the number plates, son. So you just leave this to fucking me. And then you turn off the road because this dude might be following you. And I'm not saying he was paranoid. I'm saying the world he lived in was a scary world, if that makes sense. Because he remembered everything all the time. And it also means you can't really function in society because you can't have a job. You can't listen to anybody. You can't socialize with anybody because everyone's a fucking moron. So he had my father got diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. And I do believe he had it, and people say I have it, but I don't. When you have true narcissistic personality disorder, you truly believe you're almost invincible. Does that make sense? Like, guns were pulled on him and you go, you think that's going to kill me? Shoot me. Shoot me. And he get furious. Like, how dare you believe a weapon can kill him? He was fucking enraged. Like, that's who he was. So yeah, he was a super interesting guy to grow up around, because it's weird to be around a dude who's so big and so strong and also so smart. And you have to just accept second place all the time. And then you're arguing about number plates on some fucking Corolla from Thursday. And it's like,
so how did you process that? Was it, I'm always going to be in this shadow? Or was it, I want to make him proud? Was it, I still have his genes? Was it, we're destined to do something big? Like what? Because in most instances like that, it's more like, yeah, I'm just going to be his son.
Yeah.
Versus to come and create your own identity with that kind of a shadow.
Yeah.
That's not easy to do.
Completely. And he made it very, very clear. My father was also quite a morbid man. I think because of his life, even in his last years, he spoke all the time about, he had conversations which were, you'd be sitting at the table and he said, are you prepared for my death? And you'd just be like, wow, is that a will and testament? What are you talking about? Like, are you prepared? Like, he'd talk about dying. He'd talk about me being the oldest son. He'd talk about me having to carry the torch. He talked about this stuff a lot. How soon did
he start doing that? At what age?
When I was young, 19, 20.
Got it.
Quite young.
So he died October 17, 2015.
Correct.
So you're saying 19, so that would be your 35, 25, so 16 years ago,
yeah.
2006.
Yeah.
So 10 years before he passed away, he's talking to you that way.
He's talking about death. He's talking about what that's going to mean. He's talking about how I have to carry the family torch. He's talking about my responsibilities and duties. He's talking about the fact that I need to evolve and be a better version of him. He talked about these things a lot. Now, he also used to, till the day I was an adult, he still had a superior complex over me, and I respect it. My dad used to say things like, oh, you're champion now. You know, there's probably only one man left who could whoop your ass. That's who he was, right? He still believed he could beat me.
You gotta love that, though.
Yeah, he still believed he could beat me. That's who he was. He's like, nah, you may be champ, but there's one man left who could whoop your ass, son. And that's who he was. And I had so much respect for him. I was like, yeah, because, you know, you're right. So that's just how he was as an individual. But I think it's the opposite. He set such a high standard in certain regards that I knew I couldn't just be some normal guy. I'd feel guilt. I'd feel dirty if I was just some normal dude. Like I can't just be, I'm his son. You know, like in the old movies when you watch Conan, they say, Tate, the son of da-da. I was always the son of Emory Tate, even at the chess tournaments. It's the son of Tate, the son of, the son of, the son of. The expectation was there. And instead of it preventing me from creating my own identity, it was actually the opposite. It's like, okay, I have to be fantastic. And I was cerebral enough. I said to my dad, look, I can't be as good at chess as you can. I don't think I can do this. And he said, well, you could, but belief is a huge part of it. So if you don't believe you can, then what else are you going to do? Because I remember telling him I didn't want to play chess anymore. He said, that's fine, but you're not going to not play chess and fucking watch TV. You play chess for 6 hours a day. So you need to come to me with a plan for 6 hours a day, son. What are you going to do with your life? And I chose fighting because I said, listen, chess is one-on-one competition without luck, without a team, no ball, no wind to blow the ball in the net. What if I fight? He said, okay, I respect that. You can be a fighter. So he wasn't trying to force me to do anything, but he was a very regimented individual, and that's who he was. And I had so much respect for him, and he was my superhero. I wanted to be like my dad. And even from a very young age, even if you were to Google up my dad, Emory Tate, and look in the chess community, they called him E.T. for Emory Tate, but also E.T. like the alien because he was a bit strange. But the way he played chess was so unorthodox that sometimes he had some spectacular losses, but sometimes he had some spectacular victories against some of the top players in the world. So everyone was scared of him because he played with such recklessness. that he was like, it was blitzkrieg. If you get through it, you survive, you get to beat him. But when it's coming hard and the heat's on, he destroyed some grandmasters so badly that they took like a year away from tournaments, like genuine like embarrassment. That's how he played. So nobody wanted to play my father because it was a risk, right? Because he's only top 200 in the world, but he's smoking top 10. Sometimes he loses, but sometimes he'll fucking take your head off. So he was an anomaly. So whenever I went to a chess tournament, they're like, Tate's here, Tate's here. There's always the rumbles and, oh, Tate's here, fuck's sake, Tate's here, Tate's here. So the name was always feared. And I think that was part of it for me. I wanted, when I turned up to a fight event, Tate's here, Tate's here. I want my name to mean something, right? I want it to mean something like, and that was always very important to me. And I was just told, look, you want your name to matter, then you have to go make it matter. It's not going to matter by default. And if you have good parents, and some hardship and some trauma, I think any man can become anything they want to be.
How did he bring the two of you guys together? Like, what would he say? It's three of you. It's you, your brother, and your sister. Yeah. What would he say to keep you guys together? Was it, hey, you guys can never backstab each other. You guys can never do, like when the whole example given with Logan and Jake to you, that doesn't make any sense. Correct. What did he say to unify the two of you guys or the three of you guys?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. He was very, very focused on my brother and I's relationship and making sure we're close. And he just made it clear that as you excel in life, you're going to have a lot of enemies. And if you can't rely on your brother, you can't rely on anybody. And even when we were kids and we would argue, I remember one time we were arguing over Lego, dumb shit. And we were in the dining room and we're arguing over Lego. And my brother ran in there and said, Andrew stole the Legos, da-da-da. And he said, I don't have time for this bullshit arguing over fucking Legos. And my brother was crying because we'd had a little fight and I'd hit him or whatever. And he put us in the dining room. He said, you're both staying in this room in fucking silence for 2 hours straight. If I hear a noise, I'm starting the timer. So sit here. And we're both scared to get hit from him, right? So we're like, shit. So we sit there. And we're sitting there looking at each other, two 10 and 8-year-olds, crying, angry at each other. And as soon as one of us would like move on the seat, he'd say, I'm starting it again. And after 2 hours of sitting in perfect silence, it got to the point where me and Tristan learned, just don't argue around Dad, because we're going to end up just sitting in silence, staring at each other in the face, just sitting there. So we just didn't argue around Dad anymore. And then by extension, Mom was like, I'll tell your dad. So it was like, oh shit. And then we just stopped arguing completely. Me and my brother have not had a serious argument in years.
Gotta love it.
Well, if we disagree,
we'll
like, okay, we disagree, it'll be 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Sure.
But we'll never, ever argue. We share everything. We live in the same house, all the cars we share, bank accounts, like, besides women in underwear, you name it. We share absolutely everything from head to toe. We never, ever, ever argue. And another key to that relationship is Tristan accepting I'm the older brother. That is a big key to it. Tristan will accept.
Older or alpha? There's a difference.
It is a difference. But I also think if we ever do truly contest, he will say, okay, well, it's 50-50. And I might pull out this card once a year if that, but you're the older brother. So there still is that older brother
Meaning
thing.
He knows you're the alpha.
I think so. Yeah, I think he knows, well, you're the big brother. You're the older one, so thing. So if we're ever 50-50 on a call, I'm the older brother. So that's it. But I also, unlike a social media company, know when to use my power. I also know when to concede and when to say, you know what, okay, you know more about this or you know more about that, or you care about this more than I care. I don't give a shit. Whatever. But very rarely I can pull that card. But he was very, very interested in creating that relationship and making it very, very clear to us that as my father lived in a combative world where he was surrounded by enemies in his mind, whether it's a Corolla with a license plate, whether it's people trying to kill him, whether whatever, the KGB agent at the chess tournament who threatened him in Russian. My father was fluent in Russian. He always had enemies. And he was actually attacked and very badly hurt in Budapest in 1998. He played in a chess tournament. He beat a Russian grandmaster, and then he was jumped and beaten in the subway and had to be hospitalized and nearly killed him in a subway in Budapest in 1998. He believed it was a hit from the KGB, but the guy was an ex-KGB guy. I personally think you just beat an ex-KGB guy and pissed him off. Wrong place, wrong time. Eastern Europe was different in the 90s. They hurt him bad. So he lived in a very combative world. And in his world, it was, Andrew, they're going to come for you. You're a Tate. They're going to come for you like they came for me. And if you haven't got Tristan, you haven't got anybody. And he always taught us.
Combative or paranoid?
And that's the thing. You're paranoid until you're right. Yeah. You can be paranoid for 20 long years. And then it goes down. So it's hard to once again say. It's also, again, like when I talk about my father, we talk about, let's say, the number plate things. Was this person following them? No. But that's his world. Your mind is your world. If in your world, we talked about believing in things that give and giving it power. If you believe you're being followed, you're effectively being followed. Like, what's the difference, right? So he was paranoid, but he was reacting to the reality he lived. And that was who he was. And he had enough unfortunate incidents involving pure violence to know that the world can get violent quickly. And this is the difference between fighting and violence. We talk about this all the time. People say, oh, Tate, but you're a fighter. And I say, listen, I grew up in a world of violence. And even to this day, I know some very, very violent people. And there's a massive difference between fighting and violence. I've seen genuine violence, and it's an ugly thing. Like, I'm a fighter, right? But if I had a real beef with someone, let's say they killed a member of my family, I wouldn't be trying to fight that man. I'd be aiming to be violent. An SUV on a pavement is violent. 10 dudes with a machete is violent. Like, violence is violence is when you don't allow any chance of victory for the opponent. Violence is there's no competition involved. Violence is just pure attack. And my father's been subject to that, and he survived it, but he's seen how it works, and he's just made it very clear. Andrew and Tristan, your best hope is together. You can't do it apart. You can't do it separate. And this is also, I think, a lot of our mentality, even to simple things like girlfriends. Because a lot of brothers, they get different girlfriends and they move in with their different girlfriends, and their girlfriend doesn't want them to hang around with their brother because they're too busy having fun getting girls and all this kind of shit. And to a degree, your relationship with females can attack your power dynamic of your brothers. But me and my brother never allowed that. If I sat with a girl and she said, oh, your brothers, I don't like your brother. I said, listen, you better learn. You can learn or you can leave his house. This is your house. This is our house. You can choose. You like the Tate brother. You like me, obviously romantically, but you like him. He's your best friend. Or you can leave this house. And some girls have left. That's fine. But we've always allowed nothing to get in between us. And I think even if I analyze the Paul brothers, Jake and Logan, I think if you look at their podcasts carefully, they talk about like some girlfriend, they both fuck the same girl and all this stupid shit. But like, he's your brother, bro. Look, fucking some girl. She's forgot about both of you. It's crazy. You got to have that blood bond. And I think in many other cultures in the world, this is more common. Like, I grew up in Luton, which is it's England, but it's a very, very Muslim town. And all the gangsters and dangerous people, and even the most successful businessmen, all of them, when I was in college, were Muslim guys. And I was like, hey guys, what's your fucking secret? Like, how are you doing this? You work in a chicken and chip shop, a fast food restaurant, and you're pushing a Lambo. How? He's like, well, I have 9 brothers. I was like, yeah, but what does that mean? He goes, no, because when he used to call me white, when you white boys have 9 brothers, you all get 9 girlfriends and go pay 9 different rents. When I have 9 brothers, that means 9 women move into the family house. They all cook and provide, and us 9 men go make money and we pool our family incomes. How can we not have a Lamborghini and own the house we're in and the house you're renting? It's a different mentality.